Perhaps this question's a bit geared towards Piotr and your expertise, but what do you think will happen if these Asian countries are admitted in May at the ministerial meeting in Kiruna? How will that fundamentally change the Arctic region and the Arctic Council? And also, perhaps conversely, if they're not admitted, what will happen then to the Arctic Council, and perhaps will these Asian states take Arctic issues to other forums, as some of our speakers have hinted?
Yes, well, I guess this nothing will happen when they will be accepted, and the Arctic Council will proceed as it proceeded, and actually it may benefit more of this presence and more engagement of this Asian actors, and of course that's a question of this particular interests of the Arctic states and understanding of specific issues. So unless there is no clarification or mutual understanding of certain issues, there will be no they will be considered as a challenge or as a hindrance for the cooperation, not as actually an opportunity or the asset for the Arctic Council. But I wouldn't say that acceptance of the Asian actors will change dramatically the situation within the Arctic Council and the region in general.
And what if the answer is no in May? Well, what do you think will be the consequences then?
Yes, there were voices that there is a possibility to move to other forums, and this was particularly well expressed by France, surprisingly, but this was supported by China, and I've heard one presentation by a Chinese scholar, and he actually confirmed that China might be considering moving the discussions to the UN or even creating a sort of different forum for discussing these issues just among the interested actors, or just within bilateral channels of communication with states, with Arctic states that are interested in having good relations with Asian actors. So basically, I think I think that it's still very unlikely that we will move somewhere else.
Any questions from the audience at this point, or Ambassador?
I'm just wondering whether the panelists had really given thought to the aspect that the Arctic, what happens within the Arctic really does affect the rest of the world. The Arctic Council's own documents begin by saying that the region plays a role in determining the climate change which affects the whole world. Now, the presentations that we have heard focus more really, this has been touched upon, but they're focused a little more on the sort of the economic aspects of the Northern Sea routes or the oil or the hydrocarbon. I just wanted to get their feedback as to what they feel is the gains or the benefits to the Arctic Council by expanding to actually allow any participant who wants to make a contribution to the study of the climate change effects or scientific effects, but not actually benefit the Arctic Council and the world.
The question is about the contribution that non-Arctic states can make to the benefit of all of mankind by providing research resources on climate change, for example.
If I may,
No, can all answer that.
Yeah.
Perhaps Carl can start.
The tragedy of the Arctic is the result of greenhouse gas emissions from anywhere in the world, and I can't see how research in the Arctic could really help us to understand more about that. It's not very complicated. We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, so I don't really see the utility of that. Of course, there are important aspects of research in the Arctic, and I'm sure that a lot of countries are already present there, whether or not they're present in the Arctic Council. So I don't really see the contradiction there.
Just referring to this international politics, I perhaps I didn't make myself very very explicit in this regard, but the Arctic states expect also applicants or the observers to bring the Arctic perspective to global forums and to support their actions on the global institutions. So this is, for example, this taking place at this climate change conferences, and this is also to be. There are efforts already to take support of non-Arctic states within the IMO for the development of the Polar Code. So there are efforts also, and there is also a potential role for the non-Arctic actors to be involved in this broader global perspective, and that relates to the Arctic.
And I think if I could just add one thing, I think the Arctic states might actually benefit in including more distant states in, say, climate change research, because that would sort of help to illustrate the connections between what's happening in the Arctic with the rest of the world. And I think the Seychelles, for instance, they have a roving ambassador for climate change who goes around the world talking about how these small island developing states are being quickly affected by sea level rise, and though the ice is melting in the Arctic, that's affecting these places in the tropics. And I think drawing those connections instead of just thinking about the ice cap as so far away, oh, it's melting, but it's not really affecting us. I mean, it is affecting these people who are not emitting so many carbon emissions as they are up in the Arctic. So I think it's important to show those connections.
Please.
I have two questions. One is that to Bill, what is the future of the Arctic Council? Which direction the Council will go to? For example, will it be more powerful in future, like intergovernment international organization? Will it make more declaration, boundary international declaration or treaties among member states? And under this, under this structure of the Arctic Council, what's the big difference between official permanent observer status for China and just stay outside the council to make cooperation with the different member states of the council?
Okay, the questions are, first of all, what is the future development of the Arctic Council in terms of the powers, whether it will become a more policy-making organization? And the second question was, what difference does it make to actually be a permanent observer in the Arctic Council as opposed to just being an outsider making bilateral agreements with individual Arctic countries? Yes. So, Peter?
So let me address the first one. It's a very interesting question, and I don't think that the Arctic states know that, what the Arctic Council will develop to. And I think that the general direction right now is to strengthen the council institutionally, to make it able to fill in the gaps, that existing gaps or the identified gaps in the existing institutional legal framework applying in the Arctic, and the signs of that are already apparent. And for example, this regional agreements, legal binding agreements negotiated under auspices of the Arctic Council, but are not the Arctic Council specific agreements, but are good examples of this way of proceeding with the future role of the Arctic Council. And perhaps it might become a kind of a hub for different institutions, even global institutions that may have interest in the Arctic affairs. So the Arctic Council would coordinate this entire framework. So that's the potential role of the Arctic. I don't know if this will develop this way, but yeah, that's one of the scenarios. But the other question is there are actually I pointed some opportunities for observers that if they were accepted to be permanent observers at there is no other category now. But if there are observers at the Arctic Council, they may truly engage in the activities within the council. So, for example, if there is a project going on within the working group of the Arctic Council, that they may contribute and they can actually engage in these activities, which is impossible for outside actors or states. So they are also able to participate in the meetings, so they know what's going on within the Arctic Council, how the decisions are being made, and what are the positions of the Arctic states or different actors that are involved. So there are many benefits of being observer.
Would anyone like to add to that? Okay, is there any more questions in the back? Peter?
I was very interested about Mia's point about this being an opportunity to break down the geographically determined construction of the Arctic that's predominant at the moment. Nevertheless, it occurs to me there's something of an asymmetry in that the group of potential observers include not just states such as Singapore, which is arguably the least near Arctic state going around, due to its near polar state, I should say, due to its equatorial location, but also, for instance, the Association of Oil and Gas Producers. My question then is, to what extent are we getting away from the view of the Arctic Council as a body capable of administering and regulating the region for the benefit of those who happen to inhabit it, and more towards the conception of the Arctic as a space where global economic interests can be articulated? In other words, the Arctic Council not so much being important for what it does for the Arctic, but for what it does for its member states more broadly conceived. And when I mention asymmetry, I mean, I don't recall anyone suggesting the Inuit Circumpolar Council should be represented in the World Trade Organization due to the impact that carbon emissions close to the equator have on their indigenous, on the spaces in which they live. So again, this question of power relations from the south being imposed on the north.
Tough question to sum up, but so what do you think about the changing nature of the Arctic Council from a geographical organization to one that perhaps represents a broad range of interests that are maybe more of a global interest as opposed to a regional interest? Something like that. Does anyone like to? Carl?
I think what we see around the Arctic is just an expression of things that happens elsewhere in the world as a result of growing competition for limited resources and new arenas opening up, as in this case as a result of an ecosystem service that is kind of crumbling. You see similar things happening elsewhere as well, and it demarks something like a new geopolitical landscape. Whether or not the current group of countries in the Arctic Council are more there to protect the Arctic as such, or whether they are there to protect their own interests, well, I don't think they are more altruistic than anyone else here.
Aki, did you want to add something to that as well?
Sure.
I can.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, that was.
I think the sort of non-Arctic states' interest comes exactly where you questioned, which is that for non-Arctic states, it's not obvious how the Arctic Council is going to play a role in the future, whether it's for geopolitics or for economy, that might affect the Asian countries, or in this case, Asian countries that have strong interest in shipping and shipbuilding industries. So yes, so I think, and then it appears that to determine the future or the role of the Arctic Council, you need to be able to see how that discussion goes. Therefore, it's very important to be a permanent observer. That's probably their understanding. So they're not quite sure, but they don't want to miss the opportunity, if that explains.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, then we've just about reached 4:30, so I'd like to thank our speakers, our panelists here today, from coming from all over Europe, really, from Tromsø and from Cambridge and from Copenhagen and from right here in Stockholm. And thank you all for attending. I think we also have quite a diverse audience here from all over the world today. And also like to thank our program host, the Swedish Polar Research Secretariat, and Mistra, the funder of our program and our project. So thank you very much for attending today.